Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Danny Rogers, PRWeek's long-standing editor-in-chief, and I'm joined today by my illustrious colleagues, Siobhan Holt, our news editor of course, and our senior reporter Evie Barrett. How are you both? How was Blue Monday yesterday? How depressing was it?
I don't think it was much bluer than any other Monday. I think the industry's kind of had enough of that by the looks of some of the things we were seeing yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit bluer for me. I wasn't 100%, but back in the office, feeling much better today.
Yeah, so it's Happy Tuesday for you.
Absolutely, yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so we're recording this podcast from a studio in PRWeek's offices. So yes, we are in the office, but being in the office remains a highly talked about issue in the business world. Indeed, over the past couple of weeks, WPP's announcement that it wants all 100,000 plus employees in 4 days per week has reignited this whole working practices debate in the world of marketing, advertising, PR and beyond. We are told that WPP's CEO, Mark Reed, made a trip to his New York headquarters last year and was horrified to find that on a Monday morning, hardly anyone was in that office. And he was told at the time that many employees only came in the odd day each week. Anyway, earlier this month, he, Reed, changed WPP's policy towards this area, starting from this April, which led to outrage from many quarters. Tens of thousands of people who claimed to be WPP employees, and I'm sure many were, signed a petition against this policy. And PRWeek has since published a number of stories, as well as varying opinion pieces on this very contentious topic. So Evie, give us a flavour of some of the criticism that WPP's policy has had over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's been plenty. A few sound bites. So we discussed it at our Year Ahead event last week, and Jo Carr, co-founder of Hope and Glory, said that the policy feels regressive. She told the people there that basically Hope and Glory trusts its people trust them, and that life is a juggle, so having flexibility is key. We also heard in one of our features from Dean Connolly, who runs the PR recruitment firm Latte, and he said that it was a bold move by WPP. He can't see other agencies following suit, and he highlighted some of Latte's findings last year that apparently 95% of PR professionals prefer to work in the office 3 days a week or less. And he said that it would take double the amount of time to fill a role at an agency that mandates 4 days per week. On a similar note, last week at the Year Ahead event, Adrian Marr, who's co-founder of Fan Club PR, said the move would be good for independent agencies in terms of bringing in talent there. In a LinkedIn post, Mark Stringer, who is founder of Pretty Green, shared his view that the move is an efficient, low-cost way to decrease the workforce without going through the official redundancy procedures, although when we spoke to WPP, they denied that.
So he's saying, in effect, that WPP is deliberately doing it just to get people to leave.
Yeah, that was his view, but the WPP vehemently denied that was the situation.
We also heard from Chris Stevenson, who is Managing Director of Stripe Communications, and he said that talented employees will produce the results no matter where they're based, and that this whole situation highlights a leadership issue rather than an issue with the staff. He said that for an industry that strives to be attuned to cultural, technological and environmental change, traditional and outdated views on hybrid working continue to persist, but that it's here to stay and businesses need to work harder or they'll lose great people.
I mean, this is a debate that's been going ever since the pandemic, really, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And maybe even beforehand to a certain extent. And there's arguments on both sides, and there'll always be a lot of criticism for a company that tells its workers to get back in the office. But there was also some comments in favour of WPP, I believe, and indeed many other businesses who are trying to do the same thing. Do we have any of those examples, Evie or Siobhan?
Yeah, so on one of our recent PRWeek podcasts, actually, Warren Johnson, founder of W Communications, was asked about this topic. Well, he described it firstly as saying not one size fits all. And then he went on to discuss his own agency, where he said he's actually in 5 days a week. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he went on to say that if you're a bit more ambitious and maybe you like the hustle, like getting stuck into new business, that clearly going into the office more often is good for you because you can learn more. That was his argument. And he went on to say that maybe those that are a bit more, in his words, a plodder and quite happy to work through their to-do list and maybe not really going to get stuck into the business, and that working from home is great for them. He also added that he thinks a remuneration might start to shift accordingly to do with that. And he actually made the point as well that if you've got people that maybe don't want to come into the office, he didn't think that was a bad idea, but he said you might want to hire those people as consultants and maybe not have them on a payroll tax that's attached to that. He then added that there's a continuum in terms of loyalty and engagement where the more you're in the office, the more engaged you are in a company culture, the more loyal you are to the business, was his phrasing. And that if you're at home more days than you are at work, your commitment is to your home and work-life balance possibly, which he said was fine, but he felt that that should be priced and contracted differently. He sort of ended it that he believes it will evolve and that's good then for different businesses. So that was Warren's point. But there's been others that have opposed this view, and it's got a bit of an angry reaction from some agency bosses.
Inevitably.
Of course, yeah. So like Nick Gauvier, CEO and founder of Blurred, she said she believes the industry has a major diversity problem and that change won't happen unless agencies bend a bit and understand that not everyone's lives are the same or that they can flex in the same way, was her wording. She added that different backgrounds and life experiences are essential really to ensure diversity of thought and that sort of experience in agency world. And speaking to her, she explained that she's actually in the office 2 days a week. She said she'd like to be in the office more, but it's not possible due to geography, and that her geographical change was made for the health and happiness of her family. She said that she doesn't think anyone would ever question a commitment to the business, and she believes that she's better at a job when her family's happier. She said, I'm essentially more valuable to the business with this setup, was her wording. And for Nick, she said it comes down to her priorities, but she doesn't think that it's between home and work, which is maybe what Warren was suggesting, and it's more representative of what a company values and prioritises overall.
Yeah, so two very, very different viewpoints from people who run PR agencies.
Absolutely.
But there were other supportive words that have been written in PRWeek, right?
Yeah, we had a comment piece last week also from Chris Rumfitt, who is the boss of Field Consulting. He agreed with WPP's rationale. He said, if you run a company built on creativity and collaboration, then working from home is, quote, a disaster for productivity. He went on to say, when someone tells me they're more productive at home, I suggest that's because they're only doing a portion of their job. Sure, you get through your to-do list more quickly, but you don't build relationships at home and you don't nurture, develop and coach your junior colleagues from home. He said he doesn't know the exact ins and outs of how WPP has implemented it, but in terms of the decision, there can be little question they're doing the right thing. And it kind of plays into a wider debate that we've also seen this week with the news story of the ex-Asda boss, Lord Rose, saying that working from home, quote, is not proper work. That sparked anger from a lot of PR bosses too. There's been loads of commentary about that on LinkedIn. Lindsay Barry, who's co-founder of 5 Not 10, called it a frustrating and damaging comment. So it's got wider implications definitely beyond the PR industry.
Yeah, so there's so much polarity of views going around in this debate, with just about every extreme viewpoint taken by all sorts of people. There was a good BBC piece that I think, Evie, you forwarded me earlier this week about this whole debate. And I was interested to see Professor Bloom, who is a Stanford University economist, and he'd done some research into working from home, which suggested that employees in their teens and early 20s should probably be in the office at least 4 days a week to maximise their opportunities for being mentored, he said. And I think that's a really good point, that sometimes it depends on your seniority, whether or not you value being in the office or are valued being in the office more.
Yeah, we were discussing this, weren't we? The idea of maybe what is it then if it was younger staff coming in the office longer versus staff that have been more experienced in the industry. And we didn't really get to an answer, did we? Because we found flaws with both sides, that yes, they might learn more, but then you do need the senior staff in to be doing that teaching. It's a real conundrum of how you balance that. And then obviously if you only did certain departments, that's going to cause an imbalance then. You've got marketing not going to be very happy if finance are off at home, it feels. And I imagine that is probably why a lot of the retailers are making their head office staff come back, because it must be very hard to get retailers on the shop floor being told you're in 5-7 days a week quite often for some, and others are working from home. So I think it's I think the challenge as well with WPP might be some negativity towards the way the messaging was done as well.
Yeah.
I think that maybe didn't go down well. But again, how do you handle that internal comms around that? It's a real minefield.
Yeah, I think on the face of it, and definitely with the WPP example, it's easy to just look at it and side with the staff rather than the bosses. But there are so many factors at play, and everyone has their own preference of where they work best. So I think it's hard to have a blanket way of doing things.
Yeah, it's the whole blanket policy thing that seems to me part of the problem, because you've got 115,000 employees in WPP's case. Can you have a rule of working that fits everyone anyway? Like you say, there's lots of different job functions in there, lots of different seniorities, and some people probably do need to be in 4 or even 5 days a week. Some people probably need to be in far fewer.
Yeah.
But yet there's still this need to have a blanket policy that companies feel required to do.
Yeah.
So Evie, I guess you qualify as being a younger member of staff still.
Yeah.
What's your view? Do you feel you need to be in 4 or 5 days a week? Obviously, you're a journalist. It's slightly different from other professions, I guess. But how long do you feel you need to be in the office to learn and also get the flexibility to go out there?
Generally, I do like being in the office. I think 3 days minimum, which is what we do. I think if I was kind of asked to be in 4 days, I'd welcome that. I think 5 is potentially difficult because you do sort of need that time at home sometimes to just, as people in the industry have said, kind of get your head down, get through your to-do list. But journalism is quite a social job, so you get a lot from chatting to people as well. So yeah, I think 3 or 4 days is probably ideal.
Yeah, of course, it's been a weird one because all this debate really has come post-pandemic. Most people were probably in at the vast majority of the time before the pandemic. And suddenly for a year or two, we weren't in the office at all for large periods of time. And then it's been building back. And I do sense that companies are just trying to find the right level now in this post-pandemic world, but it's not easy.
No, I think you're right with that, Danny. But I think the great thing, the positive thing that came out of this, and it's a policy that we still have as a business, and I know a lot of businesses have, is sort of the flexibility to work from anywhere. And I know me being from the north of England, it's enabled me to definitely see family more. And I think that's maybe what's angered some people. When we were at Year Ahead, a member of the panel mentioned that they have staff that live in Birmingham that have been able to get jobs as a result. And I think it's that broadening out. It adds that diversity, as Nick argued, that it's giving insight and it's enabling people to work from different parts of the country. And also, I think it's shown the agency that there's real growth outside of London, which maybe some agency didn't have before that. So I think there's that side of it. But as you say, I think it's the balance. But for example, if you work in NHS comms or government comms, you probably are in 5 days a week. That's just the nature of the job and always has been. So I think maybe to Warren's point that it depends, it's not one size fits all, and it's working out which business you are within that, and maybe WPP sadly isn't that business.
Well said. Yeah, well, I'm sure this debate will run and run in the coming weeks, so do check prweek.co.uk for all the latest developments in that. So in other news, earlier this morning, Edelman launched its 2025 Trust Barometer in Davos, which of course is taking place in the Alps this week. Now, we haven't had much time to digest the findings of the latest Edelman Trust report, and we will do over the coming days. But Siobhan, what were the main findings of this one as far as you know?
Yeah, so global fears around government, business and the rich have turned up in the grievances. So it's the latest report, and Edelman found that 6 in 10 respondents report moderate to high grievances towards those 3 institutions, and that fear of experiencing discrimination surged to record highs. And the grievances I'm referring to stem from 4 key factors, so lack of hope for the next generation, the mass-class trust divide, unprecedented lack of faith in institutional leaders, and confusion over credible information. And one of the stats that came out of the report is that 70% respondents said government officials, business leaders and journalists deliberately mislead them by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations, and that's risen year on year. So, yeah, there's some real shocking stats that are coming out of this.
One of the points that stood out to me was that fewer than half of the people they surveyed said they trust those who hold opposing political beliefs. So I think the polarisation is just going to cause more and more of an issue.
Yeah. Yes, the story of the Edelman Trust Barometer over a couple of decades has been gradually falling trust in all sorts of institutions and each other. Polarisation, lack of trust, it's all on a downward spiral. It's all rather depressing. And it's very worrying if Edelman is now saying that lack of trust is spilling over into anger and grievances. And of course, we had the murder of the healthcare boss in the States not so long ago, which was again described as lack of trust in the healthcare system and the pharma companies in America. And I'm sure we'll have other examples of where lack of trust and polarisation leads to actual violence. So we are at a dangerous point in history, I think.
On the other hand, despite a 3-point drop to 76%, the report found that my employer, as they termed it, remains the most trusted institution among participants and is the only institution trusted among low-income respondents, according to the survey. Government and the media were tied for the least trusted among those surveyed. But I think what that does show that it could be really positive for corporate comms there. Yeah.
Media always seem to suffer from a lack of trust, don't we?
We do try. Positive I did see in it, guys, was that Edelman suggested that the importance of leaning into longer form content, such a podcast. So I thought that was interesting and very appropriate that shorter videos like TikToks don't persuade. And, they've definitely been in the news more recently.
So they're saying that if you're working in the PR world, you're better focusing on podcasts to get your messages across. They're more trusted, more considered medium than posts on social media, for example.
Yeah, and we heard at Year Ahead, didn't we, as well, that a lot of the panellists were saying that when they're approaching journalists now, they are looking at more longer forms because people do respect journalists with longer form placements, don't they? And they were giving quite a few of examples of some of the journalists that they approached. So I thought that was interesting as well. So yeah, maybe 2025 is the year of long form.
Could be, which moves us on to TikTok and President Trump and all of that, which of course was the other big news yesterday on Monday. So of course we had President Trump's inauguration speech, which was quite a listen. And if you're working in the communications industry, I suggest you watch or listen to Trump's inaugural speech because he talked a lot about polarization and trust. Some would say that he only further polarizes and destroys trust. Some would have the opposite view. But he also, obviously, he's taken power at a time when this TikTok ban is sort of imminent or happening. What do you make of that, Evie?
I think it's fascinating how it's all kind of played out. You obviously had the ban and then swiftly reversed, I think it was 12 hours later, which has caused a lot of speculation over the app's links to the incoming US government and what control they might have over it. I noticed that Carrie Rose, founder of the agency Rise at 7, posted on LinkedIn calling the whole thing a PR stunt, saying she would have done the same and that she thinks it was done to get young people to make noise and to position Trump as a hero coming in to save the day, especially seeing as there was a pop-up message on the app when it came back crediting him for the return. Carrie said that she thinks there'll be a hidden agenda now that the app is back. It's kind of hard to tell which direction it's going to go in, seeing as it's still such early days. But already I've seen some TikToks from users in the US this morning saying that certain posts and search terms related to Trump and fascism have been displaying limited results from them compared to what the rest of the world can see, and that they think their comments are being restricted too. It's hard to back that up, obviously, because we can only access the UK version of the app, but it's definitely one to keep an eye on, because I think even whether there's actually interference or not, it could still have huge implication for social strategies if that narrative carries on and people think that they're being influenced and try to boycott the app.
Yeah, social media is the other big story at the moment, of course, because you have got the ban-censorship on TikTok. At the same time, of course, Meta, Facebook, and also X, Twitter are reducing their fact-checking and their moderation there. And in Trump's inaugural speech, he actually said, "I'm going to stop all censorship in America," which presumably is exactly what people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg want to hear. So there's a weird thing going on the social media world. How do we think it's going to impact PRs who use social media?
It's going to really impact the strategy. I don't know how you even conceive that strategy when you're not... How do you forward plan something you're not sure what's going to be there in the next 2 days, let alone anything else? And the way social media changes, it's not like print where you might be able to preempt it. It's so fast moving. I don't know even where you'd start if you're a social media strategist.
There's almost no mainstream option which is kind of safe now. Yeah. They're all kind of implicated in this. So I think brands will really struggle to know how to approach it.
And what do you do if it goes against your whole ethos?
And what about Blue Sky? Is that taking off at all?
It's a funny one because it really seemed like it was taking off. And then, I don't know, personally, I haven't checked it in months. It had a couple of weeks where it seemed to be doing well and then seems to have died down a bit. I think also people were using that for business purposes, but I don't know anyone who was kind of on it personally, really. So I don't think that's where you'll kind of target the masses.
So TikTok is still the most powerful medium. And
of course,
it's not really being affected in the UK, is it?
No, not as far as I can tell. But I think the skepticism that people in the US are having is kind of having an effect here. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. Definitely the people who are speaking out against TikTok seem to be getting a lot of engagements. There seems to be a sort of uprising of users wanting it to not be affected.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. And if any of our listeners do have views on social media strategy or influencer strategy in this context, do contact Evie or Siobhan and let us know your thoughts, because it's become such a big part of the earned media world and paid media world recently, but it just seems to be in turmoil at the moment with all these changes. Okay, it's all happening in January, isn't it? But that's all we've got time for today, unfortunately. So thanks so much to Evie and Siobhan for your time. If you've enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PR Week's Beyond the Noise podcast. And most importantly, come back and listen to our next episode. So thanks for listening. Until next time, goodbye.